Welcome to In Search Of. We're your hosts, Ashton
and Sam. We're two accountants who binge podcasts by day and TV by night.
Keep listening to find what you've been in search of. Hi, Sam.
Hey, Ashton.
What's up?
Not much.
Okay.
Except kind of a lot.
Yeah, a lot. So anyways, it's been a while, so we're like super nervous again.
I feel like it was a while last time.
Yeah, because
it was like Halloween, it was Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
and now
so
it's
I
been
guess
a few weeks since Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it has been a little while. Also, I saved something to tell you. So around Thanksgiving, we went and stayed in a hotel, and I thought of you because we are very relaxed in hotels, and you are not. That's what made me think about you during these few weeks that we weren't together.
Yeah, and I just had surgery this past week, and being in a hospital setting is like my nightmare. Mm-hmm. And I came home, and it was not 5 o'clock yet, so I still had work to do. And usually I like to come home and like, if I could go in a hazmat suit, I would. And I wanted to come home and like take a scorching hot shower and like immediately wash all my clothes, but I still had work I had to do, so I came home and I was like disgusted with myself for a few hours.
Yeah.
Well,
we need to do like a poll on Instagram and be like, are you like a relaxed in the hotel, or are you like a don't touch anything in the room hotel room?
Like I have to have socks and shoes on. We come armed with a bottle of Lysol. We have to spray everything before we touch it. This is gross, but I mean, we don't usually stay for that many days in a hotel, but I try not to take a shower. I don't touch any doorknobs. I don't touch the remote control. I'm
impressed.
We bring our own sheets, and we once had like this sleep sack thing, and it was like a silk like sleeping bag that you could just put your whole body in, so you wouldn't have to touch anything. We bring our own pillows. My dad is not like this, and he thinks we are absolutely crazy, but my mom and I are. So.
See, I'm the complete opposite. I'm like, if we drive a long way, stop in the hotel, I'm like, kick off my shoes, go take a shower, hop in the bed. It's like
and I'm vacation. Thinking about you going to New York and doing this in a New York hotel.
Oh, I'm going to be living my best life. Anyways, we got off topic there, but yes, Sam and I haven't seen each other in a while, so I try to save some conversations for this, because if not, we would just
we don't really talk during the work days as much anymore, because we know that we'll exhaust all of our conversations.
And then we would sit here silent. Yeah. But anyways, we're here to talk about held hostage. We were debating, the topic is about being held hostage. Hostage situations. And we were like, do we call the episode hostages? But that sounds like sausages.
Yeah, it doesn't roll off the tongue.
No. So this is, if you're in search of a TV show, a podcast about being held hostage, that's what we're talking about today. Yeah. So we got, our TV show is ClickBait. Sam's going to be doing 22 hours, which is a podcast, and I'll be doing 48 hours. So we kind of got to play on
time
numbers kind of thing.
But
so those are our 3 things we recommend. And if you don't want any spoilers, stop now. Also, go tell these podcasts, if you listen to them, we sent you. And then also, if you like us, follow us, subscribe to us.
Leave a review.
Yeah, leave a review. Say, hey, what the F are y'all doing?
Yeah, we'll take constructive criticism too, because we are really just trying to make this actually a thing for us.
Yeah, so tell us. We need to hear it. But anyways, okay, so first with ClickBait. This is actually a show we both like.
Yes.
It's not a show that Sam dislikes and I like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we both love this show.
I actually saw / heard like really bad reviews. Like
Really?
I think it's like a 50% on Rotten Tomatoes.
What?
And this is another like curveball ending. Like the last show had a curveball ending behind her eyes that I did not like, but I liked this one that came out of nowhere. It's kind of
the same thing where it like takes you for this long story. Like you literally have no idea the whole time. Like it makes you think like, oh, you think this is the person behind it, or you think like at first you think it's the husband. Right? They kind of make it seem like the husband was like messaging these girls, had the profile, doing the thing. Then you learn like, okay, maybe it's not the husband, maybe it's the coach, his best friend. So they kind of go down this like rabbit hole, and you know, like at first you're like, okay, could it be the husband? But he just seemed too nice. And then the coach, I definitely thought was in on it. Yeah, and I mean, the guy dies kind of in the beginning. I thought the show was going to be, because the show is sort of like a countdown. It's like if this YouTube video gets like 5 million views or whatever, this guy is going to be killed. And I thought the whole show was going to be like in a timeline of views kind of. And at the end, he was either going to escape or die. And he died right at the beginning. And then, they introduce a bunch of characters, and you're trying to think like, oh, could this guy have done it? Could this be part of it? And none of the things that I thought ended up being what happened. So I also think the main character is so cute. Like
Adrian Grenier.
He's so cute.
Yeah, he's the guy in Devil Wears Prada, the boyfriend. Yeah. And he was in, not Entourage.
Yes,
Entourage.
Yeah, he's a cutie.
He's
for
nice
sure
to look at. Unfortunately, he's not, he's like the bad guy, but not bad guy, but
they just make him out to be kind of. So then it ultimately ends up being a woman he works with, and she is living this, it's so weird, she's living this double life. She's like catfishing people,
pretending to be him.
And she strikes up a like conversation with this girl who I think has some mental like she struggles with, I think, depression and some other, I can't remember exactly what she struggles with, but eventually I think they get in a fight, and she's like, the girl she's talking to is like threatening to hurt herself, and I think the woman's like, I don't care, I don't really remember what happens, and then I think she ultimately commits suicide, right? Well, then her brother finds her, I think gets upset, and then tracks the profile down and thinks it's him.
Yes.
And
so he takes him hostage with this other guy.
Yeah.
And you can kind of tell while they have him that like some things are not like clicking, and he's like, wait a second. Are you, is it really?
The brother? Yeah.
And because the guy who's taken his name is Nick, I think. And he has some kind of pieces of evidence to prove that like that was not me, like I did not do this, and he's like sort of like, I get this, but not really, and he's just so hurt that his sister was pushed to do this that he was like, I don't care, like I'm gonna do it no matter what. But he ends up.
And then you said sister, but I was also thinking it's his sister and wife who end up figuring it out.
Yes.
And finding him.
Yeah.
And their relationship was kind of weird too.
Yeah. But Nick finds out that he realizes his coworker is catfishing and is the one who's pretending to be him and sending all these terrible messages that led this girl to kill herself. And he goes to her house, and her husband whacks him on the head and kills him.
But he escapes, I thought.
Well,
knocks him out, but he like wakes up and then escapes.
Then he runs off and escapes.
Oh my God, I remember watching that. I was like so mad because he was so close to like getting out and exposing it then.
Yes. And then the little boy, who's
his son.
It was his son.
Yeah. Goes to the house, I think.
And they tried to kidnap him.
Yeah.
Because he starts to put it together.
Yes.
They were going to kill him. Then the boy runs away. So it's like this build up, and then a million things happen at the end.
Yeah. It was so good.
Yeah. I thought it was good. It really kept my attention.
That and Behind Her Eyes, I think, came out around the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was some good TV. I really enjoyed that. But so kind of goes along with our theme, because he was held hostage for however many hours. And then, once it hit the how many million views or something, then I think they killed him.
Yeah.
And his friend was a little crazy. I think his friend was the one kind of crazy, like, yeah, let's do it. And the brother was kind of starting to realize, like, okay, this is not, I don't think he did it.
Yeah.
I kind of second.
Think I have the wrong guy, but I'm in too deep at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. So crazy show, but it was good. So
Yeah.
y'all should go
Do
give
recommend.
it. For sure. Okay. So now on to the podcast.
Yes. So my podcast is called 22 Hours, and it's a production of WTOP, which is a news station in Washington, D.C., and it's hosted by WTOP employees. So Megan Cloherty, and she's an investigative reporter, and her coworker Jack Moore, who's the digital editor. And she was the one who like broke the case in Washington.
Yeah, like she was actually sitting in the
and she was in the courtroom.
Yeah.
So the podcast has like transcripts from the court proceedings and all of that. But the podcast was released in 2019, but the story happened in May of 2015. And it's the story of the Savopoulos family. The father his name was Savas. His wife was Amy. They had a 10-year-old son named Philip, and they had 2 teenage daughters who were away at boarding school at the time. So they are still living. But those 3, Savas, Amy, and Philip, and one of their housekeepers named Vera, were held hostage in their home for 22 hours, and then they were murdered in their home, and the home was set on fire. So the podcast opens with a man who was doing work down the street from their house, and he was driving home, and he noticed like smoke coming out of the house, and so he calls it in, and some firefighters arrive on the scene, and they find 4 bodies, so the 3 adults and the 1 little boy, and then it kind of goes into, like, right away they say that Darren Wint is the one who did it, and they kind of explain everything that happened. So they say this is not like a whodunit or like what exactly happened, because they have like pretty good records in a case like this to say what happened and when, but the question is why. It just really doesn't make sense. So Amy and Philip were home one day, and Philip was home from school because he was going to a doctor's appointment. And their housekeeper, Vera, was there. And Savas was actually, so he was the CEO of American Ironworks, which is like construction company. And they were a very wealthy family just outside of Washington, D.C. They actually lived not far from like the vice president's house at the time. And he was actually opening a dojo studio. So it's like Japanese martial arts. And so that was in Virginia. And so that day he was working on, they were very close to opening, so he was working on final things out there. Amy and Philip were home because of Philip's doctor's appointment, and then their housekeeper was there. And after the doctor's appointment, Amy, they think she went out maybe to just get Starbucks. She made a quick run, and they think at that time Darren like snuck in. He cut the phone lines of the home, snuck in, and took those 3 hostage when Amy came back. And then they have like phone records and text messages that were outgoing from the home while they were being held hostage. And Amy called her husband and like lured him basically back home, which kind of didn't make sense because she knew how close he was and how stressed he was with the opening of this studio. But he came home, and so he was the 4th victim to be held hostage. And then Savas had to call he had like a personal assistant that he hired. He was like 20 years old, and he had been fired from a previous job, but Savas knew him and kind of wanted to help him out. And so he called this guy named Jordan, and he said, I have like a package that I need you to pick up and bring to the house. And all of this was done like under duress, under like Darren Wint telling them they need to do this. So Savas had withdrawn $40,000 from the bank. Jordan picked it up, brought it to the home, and like dropped it in a car that was parked in their garage. And there was, Amy had sent some like outgoing messages. One was to their other housekeeper named Nellie, and she said, like, Nellie, I want to make sure you do not come today. And there were like typos in her text message, which Nellie thought was kind of odd. And she was like, she wouldn't normally tell me not to come. Like, that was kind of weird. And then Savas also called Nellie and left a message and said, hey, Vera is going to spend the night with us. I want to make sure that like everyone knows like not to come looking for her or to ask for her. She's staying here and she doesn't have a phone charger. Like, very weird reasons why she was staying. And after the fact, Nellie said that was a very weird message, but she didn't get it until the day of the fire. So they were taken hostage one day, and almost 24 hours later was when the fire happened. And so Nellie didn't get that message right when he left it. And then another weird, like, outgoing call was Amy ordered 2 Domino's pizzas, which that like just makes no sense to me. So Darren apparently forced Amy to order 2 pizzas from Domino's, and like very explicit instructions of like, when you deliver it, don't knock, don't ring the doorbell. Like, I don't feel well, so don't like disturb the house. And so he went out, got the pizzas, brought them back in. When he brought them back in, he realized, oh shoot, they have security cameras. So then there were a bunch of calls to the security company saying, what is recorded? What is stored? How do we delete what's stored? Like, how does the system work? And again, the security company thought that was kind of odd, but I mean, they didn't know. I mean, how would you know? It's just kind of weird questions. So the pizza kind of becomes an important piece of evidence because Darren eats it and leaves a piece, and his evidence is on the pizza crust. And like, even after, through all the fires, like the pizza remains like intact, which is like,
Domino's pizza, I mean, can survive.
I know, like, that's kind of scary. It's like the Twinkies that are like
or
indestructible.
Like the McDonald's that doesn't go bad after
yes
years.
Yeah. Like, people keep it in Ziploc bags and they're like, there's no mold.
Which is a weird thing people do anyway.
Yeah, I don't know why you would do that. So they find his DNA on this pizza crust. So anyway, Darren ends up blaming his brothers, accusing them because the type of DNA that is found at the crime scene at the house can be shared by a sibling. And so he's like, oh yeah, so is my sibling. But his siblings have alibis, and I think it's kind of neat. One of his brother's alibis was that he was watching like the premiere of this music video that one of his friends put together. And the music video, the song is like the soundtrack to the podcast. So like the little music that you hear in the beginning, it's called Haters Gonna Hate, or Haters Hate, or something like that. And so that's like the little beat in the beginning, which I thought was kind of cool. But anyway, they convict Darren. He's sentenced to life without parole. But this story has stuck with me. Like, I listened to it right when it came out, and I tried to get someone else who likes true crime podcasts to listen. And she said she couldn't stick with it. It didn't like hold her attention. And it is a long one. So there's 13 episodes, and they're like an hour. Some are a little bit more than an hour long, but I think they're just so well done, and they keep my attention. And as someone who, like, I can't watch movies, which I think I've said before, like, I could listen to like back-to-back episodes of this and it did not lose me. And it's really easy to follow. It's really thorough. The website, actually, if you go to like WTOP in 22 hours, they have, a little blurb for every episode, but they have images that go with every episode that I think are really helpful. And they kind of give you the layout of the home and images from the home. And I mean, obviously it's weird saying that this is like a favorite because like it's a horrible story. So it's not like a favorite, but I think it's just a really well done podcast. And it's just one that has really stuck out to me. Yeah. And I mean, how like horrible.
Yeah.
And
like it's like you can't even imagine. What they it's
and
like undescribable, and there's like so many different things that happen, and you're just like, why and how did it like keep happening? Like how did something not happen to like alert somebody else? Or
because there were so
he
many.
Called his like sister, I think, and had her like wire money.
Yes,
he was talking to they were talking to like so many people on the outside. Yeah,
and it's like everyone had like, this is a little weird. Yeah. But none of it all came together into a, wait, let me like actually check on this. And they're like, it's one of the defense arguments was Darren Wint was one man. How could he overtake 3 adults and a child for 22 hours? Like, how could they not overcome him? And they were like, I mean, the answer is kind of simple. Like, they did it for their son.
Yeah, they would do anything to keep him alive.
Yeah, and I mean, that does make sense. But then it's like, why? He got the $40,000. Why brutally murder these 4 people, including a 10-year-old boy, and set the house on fire? Like, you got the money.
Yeah, they were, I think, physically abused, shot, and then
they did not die in the fire. They were like brutally murdered. They think the boy was maybe still alive when the fire started, and his room was like a complete flashover, or whatever they call it when a room like suddenly erupts. But like he had like, the boy had like a sword that was like a real sword, but it was like kind of like a piece of like, not memorabilia, but like a thing for him. And like his blood was on the tip of it, and baseball bats, and they were not handcuffed, taped to chairs. And so, it was just,
it's a horrible thing.
And it seems so personal, but this guy, I mean, I think he worked for Ironworks like a long time ago, but did not know him like personally, like didn't have a personal like vendetta against this guy or his family. And I mean, he was like out of money, and there's an episode where they kind of talk about his like prior life, and he had called his girlfriend and told his girlfriend he was going to kill his family. And he was like, if you don't ever see me again, it's because I've killed like everyone. I'm so mad at my family. And like, I mean, it's pretty obvious.
Something was wrong. Yes. Yeah. Also, I can't get over the fact that he did all that for $40,000. Like, really?
I know.
$40,000?
I know.
It's almost like you got more out of what you did to them than $40,000.
Right.
Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
And what is $40,000 going to do to you when you're in jail? Because like, how are you going to get away with this?
Yeah, it's almost, I don't know. He went in. It's like he didn't go in with a plan, and every little thing kind of just unraveled, and it was like this domino effect. Yeah. And it just, it's what pulled me in, because I listened to it right when it came out, and then listened to it again this past week for the show, and I was having so much trouble like putting that one down and going and listening to mine, because the story, like you said, it just pulls you in. And literally in the first episode, they have like the firefighters, their recordings, and that stuff is just like hearing them go through, okay, there's a fire, okay, then discovering that there's people, then discovering that these people were killed before. It's like the unraveling. It's so gut wrenching. Like
because they get there and they're like, okay, it's a house fire. They didn't think anyone's home. Then they get in, and then he feels one body, and then he goes to move the body, and he's realizing he's putting this body on top of another one. He's like, oh my God, there's 2. Then another firefighter comes in, and they're trying to like move like a single body, and he's like, I have like the top half, and the other guy's like, I have the bottom half, and he's like, no, you don't. And they're like, oh my God, there's a third body. And then he finds the little boy, and they're like, there's a lot of blood for like a fire. Like, you usually don't have blood at the scene of a fire. And so they come out, and they're like, oh my God, this was not like, they died before this. And so
and I think they did a good job too of like speaking on the family. Like, they didn't really focus that much on Darren, and like he shouldn't have any focus, because what he did was so horrible. And and it's weird to like talk about this and how bad it is, it's like a hard thing to wrap your head around. But I think they did a good job of honoring the family and telling their story. Yeah. And not focusing too much on Darren when sometimes, you know, you can get too stuck on like, okay, why did he do it?
Yeah, and you're like he doesn't deserve to have a story.
Yeah, like who is this guy? Whereas they like told the stories of who they are and what they were trying to accomplish. And
yeah, they were a great family and they had like people, and the housekeeper, Nellie, talks about like her experience with them, and the daughters, they read what the daughters read in court. Yeah. And those are really touching. The one daughter said that, like, I forgive him, which I mean, she is a better person than me because I don't think I could do that.
Yeah. But it is such a good story. It is a hard story to listen to, but I think it's important because it tells their story. And it doesn't give Darren much time, which I just sometimes I don't understand where people are like. I mean, I know there's people out there who like to just kill to kill, but then there's the money thing involved, and I'm just like, what, dude, really? $40,000? I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. But yeah, it's a good one. So, but definitely prepare yourself because it's a little tough.
Yeah, it is.
So. But, that's a good one. Okay. I guess now 48 hours.
Yeah. I was going to say we're doubling it, but that's 44.
Yeah, I know. Earlier I was like, 22 is 48. And I was like, no, that's the numbers don't work.
Plus a couple.
Yeah, don't work out perfectly. Okay. So 48 hours is, part of Criminal, which I love. Criminal is a podcast that's been around for a long time and probably like one of the first podcasts I listened to. It was in there with like Serial, and I don't know, it's like one of the OGs. The host is Phoebe Judge, which everybody loves Phoebe. Hi.
I'm Phoebe Judge.
Hi, I'm Phoebe Judge. Is that what she says?
Hi, welcome. This is
Criminal. Wait, how does she do it?
I'm Phoebe Judge. This is Criminal.
Yeah.
Is that what she says?
Anyways, she's awesome. She tells like a different story every time. And her stories are so good because it's not all murder and violence. Yes, it's interesting stories. So definitely give Criminal a listen.
Sometimes they're funny.
Yeah, it's so good. She does such a good job. The network that Criminal is on is Radiotopia. And this story actually happened in 2015 as well. And the, I guess, victims and people involved, their names are Denise Huskins and Aaron Quinn. So Denise and Aaron had been together for like about 7 months, I guess at the time of like when the crime happened. And it's like important to note that Aaron had recently broken up with his ex-fiance, which seems like kind of like a random fact, but it does come into play. So they were staying at Aaron's house in Vallejo, California, and around 3 a.m. they woke up to like a man in their room, like flashing a light, like a white light, and then like red lasers, and so they thought he had like guns.
Can you imagine how terrifying?
Oh my God. She said she just like froze, and I totally could relate because I just would have like gone.
Yeah. Your heart stops and you're like
yeah, I couldn't move. So the guy announces like, this is a robbery. We're not going to hurt you. And the creepy thing is the intruder knew Aaron by his full name. So he's like, Aaron, he says like, Aaron, lie face down. And he has Denise come and like tie his arms or his hands and feet up. And so that kind of like threw them off because they're like, okay, how does he know Aaron's full name? So then once they're like then they tie Denise up, and once they're like both tied up, they give them like blackout goggles and headphones. And so the headphones is playing like calming music, like wind chimes, and it's saying like, stay calm, you'll be drugged. And they would have to answer like financial and personal information. So very, very weird. And so then at some point the intruder realizes that Denise is not Aaron's ex-fiance, and he's like, okay, this was not intended for you, like, this is like, we have to, abort the plan. Like this, I don't know why
like
that
we have the wrong person.
But yeah, I'm like, how does that throw off anything? But whatever. So he tells both of them that he's going to take Denise for 48 hours and that Aaron's going to have to like complete some task, and then Denise will be released. The robber knew, I guess, from getting the like personal and financial information, he knows Aaron has like $20,000. So Aaron would have to pay him $17,000. Again, I'm like, what is with these small lump sums of money? Like, what? I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. So the robber takes Denise, puts Denise in the trunk, and he leaves Aaron at the house, like with a camera watching him. And he's like, I'm going to be watching you. And also they think they saw like multiple people there. So they think there's like several people involved, and it's like this black market group. Like that's what they told them. And so he tells him like, I'm going to have a camera watching you, like threatens his family, threatens Denise. And he's like, if you go to the police, like I'm going to kill Denise. And so, yeah, Aaron's left at the house. The robber, kidnapper, whatever, takes Denise and drives her like hours away. And then Aaron is kind of like going in and out of it because they've been drugged. And so he like falls asleep, and then he wakes up and he like sees his phone, and he's getting like emails and messages from the robbers, like giving him instructions on when to give him the money and when they'll get Denise. And at that point, like Aaron decides, okay, I can't trust this person. Like I'm going to have to do something. And so he calls his brother, and his brother's an FBI agent actually. And his brother's like, look, you're going to have to go to the police. And so he calls the police. And the way the story's kind of set up is Aaron and Denise are like sitting there with Phoebe, and they're talking back and forth, but they do a good job of like telling their perspectives as like Aaron dealing with the cops, and then as Denise is kidnapped. So I tried to kind of split it up between like, okay, this is Aaron's experience, and then this is Denise's experience. So we'll talk about Aaron first. So they show up at Aaron's house, and they're like, have you been drugged? And he's like, yes. And they're like, they say, have you been partying? And so that's like the first red flag. And so then they see the camera, and the cops just like go and unplug it. Don't have like, his brother and family are there, but they won't let him go see them. Like they kept him secluded, like even when he went to the bathroom. So they were literally treating him like a criminal the moment he walked in the door. Yeah, this story, the second time I listened to it, because I kind of knew like what happened, it was so infuriating and so hard to listen to. And you'll, as we talk about it more, you'll see why. But there's just so many things that go wrong, and you're just like, what the heck were the police doing? So eventually Aaron is just like, what evidence do you have against me? And they don't really have anything. And so he asked for his lawyer. So they finally let his brother see him. They've been lying to his brother, telling them that he's having like a schizophrenic breakdown and saying that they know he killed Denise. And so his brother then goes and leaves to go get his lawyer for him. And eventually they I'll pause here and I'll move over to like Denise's story. But yeah, so that's kind of like that. The whole time Denise has been held, Aaron is like dealing with the cops, realizing that they don't believe him, and they immediately think he's guilty. So during this time, Denise, she was placed in the trunk. She's driven hours away. The robber like brings her in and lets her shower. And during the time she's like describing her relationship with the robber kidnapper, she says he's like oddly polite to her, which I thought was so interesting because he is like, he's gentle with her.
I remember she said that like he put her in the trunk and there was like a comforter in the trunk, so it was like soft and comfortable.
Yes, and she's like, he's kidnapping me, and he's
very nice.
Yeah, but he's being oddly polite, and that almost gives me the heebie-jeebies more than just like if a kidnapper acts like a kidnapper, but he wasn't acting like one. It's so weird. The
music, thinking about like having this like calming music.
Oh my God.
That just, ooh.
Yeah. So, she's held away. and the way she tells her story, it's like hours go by. So she'll kind of explain. She's being drugged the whole time, so she's like going in and out of it, and hours continue to go by. So eventually, after a couple hours, he tells her like, since they didn't know, like since she wasn't who they thought she was, and they don't have anything against her, this part is horrible, that she would need to have sex with him, and they would have to record it as leverage if she went to the police. So he rapes her, and he ends up raping her twice. And later that evening, he orders her pizza. So pizza comes into play again. Gave her wine, and she makes a good point. And she says, he acted like a remorseful abuser. So it's like he's kind of like role playing. It's just so strange. And so at some point, she records like a proof of life, and they send this to Aaron, and that's kind of where I left off with Aaron's story. And I'll go back to that in a second. But, they do the proof of life. Again, hours go by. There's like these gaps of time. And he then tells her like the first recording of the rape wasn't good enough, or he doesn't call it rape, but says it wasn't good enough and they'll have to do it again. And so she's like and he was like, we need to try to make it look like an affair. So, yeah.
You should see the faces that I'm making right now.
Yeah. So she's like, I basically was just performing to save her life. And it like to hear that, you're just like, oh my God, like I just can't imagine having to go through what she went through. So eventually like the kidnapper and Denise finds out that they've lost contact with Aaron, and he went to the police. And so Aaron's gone to the police, like things are kind of starting to come out. They're still, Denise is still missing. They think Aaron's done it. And I guess an article gets put out. And so the kidnapper lets Denise read the article about her missing, and she sees a statement by her dad, and she's like, that's when I broke down. She's like, even during the 2 rapes, I didn't break down. I held it together. But she was like, knowing that my parents knew I was missing, she was like, this is going to kill them. And that's just it shows you how Denise is. It's like, she's not even concerned about herself. She's worried about her parents and them knowing what she's going through, versus just what she's been through. Mm-hmm. And yeah, makes you feel even worse for her. 'Cause you're like, wow, you're just such a good person, and you're just going through a horrible thing.
All these people are better than I am, because I wouldn't.
I know. So in the whole time, she's like, I'm convinced that he's going to kill me. And she keeps telling him, I think you're going to kill me. And he's like, no, I'm going to stay to the agreement, and I'm going to release you after 48 hours. And so let me see. So finally he's like, okay, the 48 hours is up, and they get back in the car. He lets her sit in the front seat. So you can kind of tell she's built this trust with him. And she keeps telling herself she's still not convinced that he's not going to kill her, but she's trying to show him that she does trust him. So if there is a chance that she can escape this alive. So they stop at a rest stop, and she thinks they're out in the middle of nowhere, because she puts her, and she's still blindfolded during this whole process, whenever they leave, and she steps her foot out onto the ground and feels like gravel, and she's like, okay, great, we're out in the middle of nowhere, this is when he's gonna do it, he's gonna kill me. Well, he leads her into the bathroom, and so when she takes her blindfold off, she realizes oh, we're at a rest stop, he's letting me use the restroom. And so then she's like, okay, I don't think he's gonna do it, I think he's actually gonna let me go. So they get back in the car, they make it back to LA. He releases her, and he's like, count to 10, and then you can take your blindfold off. And she realizes that once she takes her blindfold off, she's within walking distance of her mom's house. So she goes to her mom's house, and she's not there. She ends up her dad was a mile away, walks to her dad's house. He's not there, but they're in Vallejo trying to help find her. So eventually she gets into a neighbor's house, and they call the police, and the police come in, and I guess I forgot to mention one thing the kidnapper told Denise was, before he let her go, he was like, I know you're going to talk to the police, because Aaron's already gone to the police, and the 2 things you can't tell them is that we were in the military and that we had sex. And he threatens, if you do this, we're watching your family, we'll kill you. And so she's like, okay. So at this point, the police have now come to Denise, and then this is kind of like, again, where all the red flags continue to unfold. And so back to Aaron, while Aaron's like being held at the police station, they play the proof of life for him, and he's like, I hear her voice, and I'm just like, oh my God, thank God she's alive. And they give Aaron his phone back, and they had it in their possession since Aaron had come in, and they had put his phone in airplane mode. And so once he turns it on, he sees all these like messages and emails from the kidnapper. And he's like, literally, they've been emailing and contacting me the whole time, and y'all didn't even. And I think at some point too, like before they put it in airplane mode, he had gotten like a few calls from the kidnapper, and the police like just disregarded it. So yeah, it's just horrible things. So once Denise is with the police, she tells them the whole story, and this made me so mad. While Denise is telling the story, one of the cops asked her like if she had ever asked the kidnapper to let her go, and she's like, what? Like, okay. And then she realizes one of them is kind of like holding a recording device by his side, and so she can tell like something's up, because she's like, okay, these, like, why are they acting like this? And so eventually they like let her cousin come in, because he's an attorney, and they take her to her aunt's house, and she gets in touch with like her uncle who's with her parents, and her uncle's a lawyer, and he's basically like, they don't believe you, like they're not buying the story. And she's like, okay. And so she just said, she's like, I literally have just been released from my kidnapper, and she's like, it's a nightmare after nightmare, and she's like, the police aren't believing me. And so Denise eventually like makes it back up to Vallejo, and the police offered Denise and Aaron they call it a proper agreement, which I guess they can, if they tell them what really happens, they could get immunity. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And they were basically like telling them like, okay, well, we're going to offer y'all this, but whoever takes it first gets it. Like
pitting them against each other. Exactly.
And then the police hold a press conference and basically like blame Aaron and Denise. They say they owe the community an apology because they've been using all the resources that they could have been using for people who actually need it, and basically think it's a hoax.
Well, the resources are garbage, so that's the resource that they're wasting. I mean, that is not the problem with that whole thing, but still.
Exactly. And the cops basically think that's like a Gone Girl case, so like they just totally write them off. And then while that's happening, like someone's emailing the police, I'm assuming the kidnapper, and he's like saying that they're not lying, like they were actually
bizarre.
I know. He was like, but it's like he wants the fame, he wants the recognition for it, and he's like, saying that they weren't lying and like providing details, like specific details from the crime, and they still didn't believe them. They still thought it was them in on it. They even thought that like Denise's defense attorney was in. Like they just, it was insane. And also what was kind of sad was like Denise and Aaron weren't reunited until like a week after the event happened, because they thought they were suspects, and they were having to like, it's horrible. So 2 months after they were attacked, so like this whole time they did not think that they were, like they thought they were the criminal, like they were in on it this whole time. So 2 months after, in another area in California, someone else like broke, or the kidnapper, attacker, whatever, broke into someone else's house, and the people fought back. And when he escaped and left, he like dropped his phone. Well, they found the cops got his phone, traced it back to Matthew Mueller is his name, traced it back to his mom's, like I guess her account. And she's like, oh yeah, he's been staying in our family home. So they go to the family home, arrest him, search his house. They see like, in his house, they find like laptops, cell phones, license plates, like all these things he'd stolen. They go to the car, and the car, it was this Mustang that he had. It was actually a stolen car. In the trunk, they find like duct tape, zip ties, Nerf guns that were painted black and had the like little red lasers to make them look like guns, and then blacked out goggles. And so they take all this evidence in, and they track down like who the car was stolen from, and they find it's from a guy who actually lives near Aaron, and said that like this guy had been they like had called into the cops that someone had been like watching people in their houses and stuff, and called it in, and the cops never did anything about it. Another red flag. So the detective kind of puts that together, because he was like, yeah, my car got stolen right around the time that the Gone Girl thing happened. And she's like, that's interesting. And so the detective calls the Vallejo police, saying, she's like, hey, I have a person of interest. And so she eventually gets connected with the FBI, and the FBI goes and looks at all the evidence, and they find that one of the laptops that was stolen was Aaron's. And so that's how they make that ultimate connection. And then also they saw in the Mustang, like the GPS was where Denise had been dropped off. So it was just a lot of evidence. And so eventually they catch this guy, and he was a Harvard grad, like lawyer, recently divorced, was having issues at work, I think let go. And it's just frustrating because they were treated as criminals right when they walked through the door, which I'm like, you as a cop, your whole thing is everybody is innocent until proven guilty. Mm-hmm. And then Matthew Mueller, they said like even in articles they refer to him as like an ex-Harvard grad. And I'm like, okay, so the guy who did
you can
this,
be a criminal, a rapist, all this, but you get to be known by the fact that you went to Harvard.
Yeah, and it's just so frustrating because it's like they are treating the people complete opposite of, like, Matthew Mueller was getting,
he was the criminal, and he was being treated as he was like innocent, and
yes.
And it wasn't that bad. And then the people who were the victims were being criminalized.
Yes, it's just so frustrating. And I think eventually they sued the cop or the police department. They paid them $2.5 million, which
they did.
Yeah, they deserved it. They eventually apologized. But yeah, it was and I think they ended up finding out there was like some corruption within the police department. Even the detective in 2015 that was like on this case got Detective of the Year. And you're like, really? But yes, this story is
insane.
One of the craziest stories. And they ultimately said that like he did it alone, and they were like, no, we saw multiple people's like feet. Like,
yeah. And so they saw at least 2 pairs of legs, I think.
Yeah. But he says like, no, it was just one person. And then I think he ultimately, I can't remember how many years in prison, but I think they said like 40 years or something like that, which I'm like, I would want that guy locked up forever. But it was sweet at the end. Aaron and Denise like eventually got married in 2018. They had a little girl, and she was born on the day, a year I think later, or 5 years later. Yeah, 5 years later to the day that I think Denise was released. Which it's like a happy ending to a horrible
thing,
yeah. And they do a lot of things with victims, which is so good because.
Did they ever say why he originally wanted his ex-fiance?
I don't know. I couldn't figure out like why that ever even mattered, because it's like I still think he would have gone through the same plan. I don't know. I don't,
because I mean they made like you said, kind of a point of like, wait, does Denise look like your ex-fiance? And he's like, yeah, they both have like long blonde hair or whatever. And then he was like, oh, shit. Mm-hmm. This is the wrong person. Yeah. But like I don't think they ever really explained why he wanted the ex-fiance.
I don't know. I don't know if that ever really mattered, because I think he still would have gone through with the same course of action, whether it was
I think he would have too, but I just wondered why he was going to target her, what he had against her, and if he even knew her or what.
Mm-hmm. This story is just so elaborate, and what that guy went through and all the things he, like the recordings to the goggles to
Yeah, and how awful the cops are. I mean, I feel like that's a common theme, but this is one of the worst. One of the worst.
Oh, 100%. It was so hard to listen to because I knew how they were gonna treat them, and yeah, I just kept going back to the like that's literally like the first thing you learn in being a cop or detective is like everyone is innocent until proven guilty. And
you at least have to like take it into consideration and be like, even if they didn't believe them, be like, okay, well, we're gonna go through the steps to prove that false or
they
true.
Didn't even go through the steps. They literally there was like when I talked about the call, like there was one call, 3 calls they got Monday night, like the first night it happened. Literally, if they would have tracked down those calls, they would have found her. Yeah. And yeah, it's a crazy, crazy story. But I'm glad that they survived. Yeah. And that they have a little girl now and everything's good. And Matthew Mueller is put away in jail. But crazy, crazy stories.
Yes.
So I don't know why I just clapped.
Well, we're done. But you do have a nice thing to end on. I do have
something good. I was thinking of something good to talk about. And mine is the Middle Tennessee German Shepherd Rescue. We rescued our pup there in 2018, and it's just a good like organization. And you know, we always try to send them, like if we have dog food left over, always try to give it to them. If we have like a kennel, like we got a kennel for DC, we used it like twice and never used it again, and we give it the kennel. And they always are, you know, they'll rescue dogs that have issues, and we'll ask for donations to try to get them the best care. And so they have a Facebook page and an Instagram, and they only adopt out like here locally in Nashville, but you can still give them, you know.
Do they have a location, or because there's another, it's called Wags and Walks Wags and Walks in Nashville, and like I guess it started in Los Angeles, a dog rescue, and they have a branch here, but they don't have any like physical locations because all the dogs are fostered, and then you pick them up from the foster.
It's the same kind of concept. It's not like a location. All the dogs, so they'll take them from like kill shelters and foster them until they find them a good home. Yeah. And so we love them and love our dog, obviously. Yeah. But yeah, they're a good little organization here in Nashville that takes care of puppies, German Shepherds. So yeah.
That is a good thing to end on.
Yeah. So I know we talked about some really dark stuff, so just go hug your dog or cat or whatever.
Or look at pictures of them online.
Yeah, whatever makes you happy.
Yeah.
Because this was some dark content. But anyways, that's it.
So till next time.
Okay. Bye, Sam.
Bye, Ashton.